In the last video, we were talking about this exercise, the 5 whys, as a really useful way to dig into intrusive thoughts. And so Matt very bravely volunteered to do the exercise for us. Basically, with the 5 whys, all you're doing is, kind of asking a question about that thing you're afraid of, and then digging into it. So you kind of say, oh, like, why am I afraid of that? You come up with an answer, and then again, you say, okay, well, why does that bother me? Or why would that be wrong? Come up with an answer, you ask why again. And you kind of keep digging into it, because even fears that might seem sort of normal and not that big of a deal, when you dig into them, you get to really fundamental anxieties, and that can actually expose a way out of these challenges. So that was the exercise here, Matt. You did it. How do you feel right now after doing it? And then we'll get into what you found.
I just began to start to uncover some deeper things, like deeper feelings that I might have. But it was only after I got to the 5th why. So like after I got to the very last, why does it make me feel this way question, I was like, oh, well, maybe I can keep going with this and see how deep it goes. So I chose something that wasn't like, I didn't think at first it was a super uncomfortable feeling that I had, but once I started getting into it, I was like, oh, I noticed that I do this a lot, and maybe it's something I should think about, just noticing when I'm doing this and thinking about different ways to handle it.
What anxiety was it?
I can kind of just go through the 5 whys that I did with myself. So
take us away.
So I started out with thinking, okay, when I meet new people, I think about the quickest way to leave a conversation. And sometimes that could mean like coming up with an excuse or saying something that might, make me want to leave, or give them an excuse saying like, okay, yeah, you can go. And yeah, so the first why to that was, okay, because I'm feeling like that because I'm uncomfortable talking about myself. Okay. And the next one was, I'm thinking that because I'm afraid I'll say something they don't like, and they think that it'll be a waste of their time. So I think by this time I started noticing, before I even enter a conversation with somebody, I'm thinking that I'm not important enough for them to be having this conversation with me. And that's why I started noticing maybe there's some other feelings in there, or there's some other thoughts that kind of build on that initial thought of like, I need to leave. And so I took it even further and I said, okay, well, it's probably because I don't think what I have to say is important to them. And then the last one is because I feel like I don't matter to new people I meet. So I think by that time I started noticing, oh wow, like this is maybe a bit deeper than what I initially thought all this stuff was going to be.
Whether you matter.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
To exist. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think especially to that person. Mm-hmm. So it kind of comes back to what I started noticing about like 3 questions in, which was just that I feel like I don't matter to that person before I even meet them, and that was like why am I even doing that? Yeah, so I started unpacking that, and I think another thing I noticed through doing this was how even unpacking kind of a simple thought, what I thought was a simple thought, can start to branch out very quickly, just because of the way I think, and just because the way our brains work, I think, of just kind of like chaining ideas and chaining thoughts, and they could be linked to experiences that you've had in the past, which I've also started thinking about, like experiences that I had in my childhood even, or it started to open these little doors everywhere, and I was like, oh, okay, like maybe it's linked to other things.
Did you start to how did that feel? Because I think that happens a lot, digging into this stuff, that you're doing this exercise at home, like, be aware, you'll start to open up all these little doors, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Because we started to think, oh yeah, well, I had this really bad experience where I felt like what I said didn't matter, or I had this really terrible experience where I had like people made me shut up, or I had this like really great experience where everyone told me what I said was so valuable and important. Because sometimes it's the positive experiences too makes us think, oh, okay, I'm not about to do something that's really positive, so I won't do it.
Yeah.
And then we also hold, and like slowly these assumptions and these beliefs get built up inside of us, and then we're carrying them around, and then we start to interact with people kind of around these big assumptions, which are basically like big piles of garbage. We're carrying around all these piles of garbage we've picked up over the years, and we walk into a conversation with this bag of garbage between us and the other person.
Yeah, that's it.
And it's just like that. We're like, oh yeah, I don't want to go and talk to this person right now because maybe they won't like my big bag of garbage. Or like, oh, I can't go into that situation because my bag of garbage will be too big and ungainly. And we just carry this around with us. So I think it's great because essentially, or like another way to look at it is like once you start opening those doors, it's basically opening up the bag of garbage and starting to pull stuff out. The question becomes, is it okay to throw out a lot of that garbage?
Yeah.
Because we don't have to carry it around. Like why can't there's always so many double negatives with this. Why can't you not matter to people? Why is it important to like say something like that's of worth?
Yeah, I think it comes from like if I'm not good enough to talk to this person, then why am I doing this? I think it even comes back to thinking about how like comfortable I am with myself before I even get the courage to talk to that person that I don't know. I might not be in a place where I'm comfortable with myself in that room. Before that moment of talking to that person even takes place, I'm already in this state of not being confident enough, not being comfortable with myself. And so, and that, I think that example of like carrying your garbage around is perfect because sometimes that's probably what I tend to like think about my memories and like things I want to talk about with that person is like they might be garbage. So why am I showing this person these ugly things about myself? Why do they even have to know?
So often when we talk about mental health issues, we talk about them being irrational, even with whether it's social anxiety, any kind of anxiety disorder, we the old way of approaching it was to help people see like, okay, well, these aren't rational and like these are delusional thoughts, but really the brain is being so logical. Basically, we, over the years learn these equations. Like if you're carrying a bag of garbage, you shouldn't talk to people. And then so we like you're like we go into a situation, we're already starting to tick off all of the bags of garbage we're holding. And then our brain is like, well, if you're holding bags of garbage, you can't go and talk to somebody. You can't give a speech. You can't ask people for a favor.
Yeah.
You're holding a bag of garbage. Like it's just, to the brain, it's just logical. And yet it starts way before. That's so useful because then you start to see the real stuff to cut out. Because if we're doing all of that other stuff before, being anxious in the social situation is totally natural.
I started noticing like, okay, what is it that I actually say or do to get out of the conversation immediately? One of those things might be talking about like almost distracting the other person and myself from talking about each other. So I'll talk about something in the space or in the situation we're in. So for example, if it's like a party or if it's just like a gathering with a bunch of people I don't know, I could be talking about, oh, like I hate the music. I don't understand why people listen to this type of music. It's just like changing the blame of and the focus to something completely different. Maybe I could potentially use that as like an exit strategy to like get out of this thing. I could definitely think when I was younger, that's what I would do. That's probably not a good way to deal with this issue because I'm not actually I'm not thinking about the problem that I'm having and I'm not diagnosing it in any way. I'm shifting everything to something else. Like I could probably even do 5 whys on that. Like even just deconstruct that.
Exactly, because that gets at something really fundamental. So often all of these things are really just about trying to avoid some uncomfortable feeling. And so learning how to be able to sit with that feeling opens up all sorts of possibilities. And then being able to sit with that feeling and actually shift the focus towards something you want. Because I think that gets at something really fundamental. And you see this kind of stuff happen all the time in like even mental illness support groups where the connection gets built around the problem. So if the connection is built around the problem, then the problem has to stay around.
Yeah.
And I think, and so that's a key piece of getting over this kind of stuff, is actually shifting the focus away from the problem. Because we do this exercise to dig into that, but then it's basically about, there's 2 steps after this. So if we say there's 3 steps, so you already did step 1.
Mm-hmm.
Then that next part is what you're in many ways describing here. You start to see all the other ways that this infects our lives. And then so we kind of identify that stuff and say, oh, okay, look, I've been doing I've been reacting to this fear in all sorts of different ways. And many of those are very normal ways that we would think of as normal, but they fuel the anxiety. A really common one we get caught up in is like checking emails. Like, oh, okay, I want to make sure I didn't say anything wrong, or we rewrite emails multiple times. And we might think like that's good, like at work. I don't want to waste anybody's time. But what we do there is just reaffirmed to our brain, like if you're holding a bag of garbage, you should not talk to people. And so we're constantly checking to make sure we got all the garbage out of the way. And then it just very naturally progresses from there because it's doing that logical thing again.
Yeah.
And so that's that second step, is really to notice all the ways we're building that logical equation and then to cut them out. That third step is to shift away from it, to really say, oh, okay, in these social situations, I'm going to have this anxiety. But instead of putting the problem at the center of things, how do I, place something at the center that's about what I want to build and create? And that's very challenging. It's so easy. And we see it. It's so easy to hate something and be like, don't you hate this? And someone else is like, yeah, I hate that too. Like, don't you hate anxiety? Oh, I hate anxiety. Let's fight anxiety together. But then what's happened there is we've just put, like, we need anxiety. Because we said, my goal is to get rid of this problem. Well, then we have to carry the problem around with us so we can, like, fight it. And that's, I think, when people are working on intrusive thoughts and any anxiety, really keeping that in mind. Like, we don't want to make the focus, how do I get rid of intrusive thoughts? Because then we need them. But it's that other thing, like, how do I be myself? How do I, and a lot of that involves kind of taking up space.
Yeah.
As ourselves. How comfortable would you feel, going up, hearing your brain say, oh, you don't have anything worthwhile to say, and then going up to somebody and talking about, like, how much you love, I don't know, like the spinach dip at a party, and being, like, open like that. Like, I just love spinach dip. It's my favorite thing in the world. I just want to smear it all over my body. Don't you love spinach dip?
Yeah, I think that would be really hard for me, actually, because that's the thing I started uncovering. Like, I feel like I've gotten better at maybe being a little less negative at like parties and things like that, but it still comes back up. Maybe it's not like I hate the music, but maybe it's like, oh, I don't know anyone here too. Like, and then that even becomes the problem too. And then that's something people can bond over sometimes. It's like, yeah, I don't know anyone. Yeah, I feel so awkward about this, and like it's a weird way of talking about the problem but not dealing with it.
I have a bag of garbage and you have a bag of garbage. Well, let's have garbage. Yeah. I think it's the toughest thing though. Like, so much of this stuff, and this I think is too where you see, like, a lot of these things drill down to very simple principles but that are so complicated, because in many ways it's this big shift from, like, because we go into a social situation, we want to get reassurance that we're welcome, or get reassurance that what we're going to do is worthwhile. We want to get whatever would be, like, escape from whatever anxieties in our head or whatever. So shifting away from that to giving. So going into a social situation and asking, like, well, so based on who I am, what do I want to give in this situation? And sometimes the thing we give is just, like, listening. I say, okay, I'm going to go and I'm going to give my awareness or my attention to 3 strangers. And I'm just going to go and do that. And, like, that's success. So often we want to get this reassurance that, like, I fit in or something like that. But the moment we want to get that, then our brain never lets us have it.
Yeah.
Where do you think you want to take things now that you've, like, dug into this?
At least to deal with this problem that I set out to unpack.
Yeah.
Trying to think about positive interactions. Just pointing out things in the situation, or if it's like a room, or even the other person, like trying to pick out something in the other person that I see as positive. I think that could be a good way of dealing with it kind of immediately. But I also think it'd be interesting to dig deeper into, because I still think there's something that caused this feeling over time. Like maybe there was something that happened in my childhood or something. There's something there that I feel kind of built up over time, and trying to understand maybe why that happened, and maybe think about instances where I do remember something happening, and trying to unpack that a little bit, because these are things that I deal with often. You know, I meet more new people all the time, just because of the things I'm involved with, and so I think it would just be nice to help myself deal with these things in a different way.
It frees us up to actually do the things we want to do, because those become such a barrier. The moment, you know, we're gonna go do something, and the barrier is like, oh, you know, our brain is like, oh, you shouldn't do that. What you're gonna do isn't worthwhile, and then we hold back, and then we're disappointed after.
Yeah,
it's really useful to recognize that those experiences from when we're younger. I'm pointing over here because I always think of there's this like little kid over here, this like little kid version of ourselves who had these painful experiences, and that little kid version is still with us. You know, we go into these situations and the little kid version is like, oh no, like don't do that, like bad thing's gonna happen again. And so much of the practice of being able to accept a thought and kind of separate from it is starting to notice that when our brains do that, that's really coming from that younger version of ourselves, and we can hear it, but now we can show our brains, that little kid, that like we're here and we can handle it. And then I find it really useful to think of it as there actually is a little kid there. I'm babysitting him. I need to show him that actually, hey, we can go up and talk to people and we can say whatever the hell we want. And that I'm going to show him how to do that. And to start to put, because I think we get so fused with it. We have that anxiety, and we have this thought, oh, what I'm about to say isn't worthwhile, and we believe it, rather than see it as this kind of this sore spot that's left over from something that happened when we were younger. So we're gonna keep exploring this, actually. So because next month in December we're gonna be looking at checking compulsions. But like you see here, so much of what we're dealing with when it comes to intrusive thoughts, you know, when you get down to it underneath, it is all about these checking compulsions that we're engaging in, and then our brain just very logically sees, based on the checking compulsions that we're engaging in, what we believe, and then it starts to throw out other worries. So we'll keep looking at this the next month as well, because it's really, once you tackle those checking compulsions, you show your brain you don't have to worry about it. Your brain doesn't have to keep throwing up all this garbage. So thanks, Matt, for diving into that and sharing that.
Yeah, no problem.